Good evening and welcome to our Ever a Dancer online series in partnership with the Department of Dance at the College of Performing Arts at Chapman University. This is an At the Musco online event putting dance at the center of the conversation. I'm Napoleon, your host this evening. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe to Musco Center on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also join our email list for updates on new happenings and online events at muscocenter.org. Our final fall event is Noche Buena, Christmas Eve in Mexico, next week on Thursday, December 17th at 7 p.m., featuring Ballet Folklorico de Los Angeles. We have already received some great questions from our viewers, which we'll be incorporating in tonight's conversation. Please ask those burning questions as they come up in the chat, and we will try to get them answered at the end of the conversation live tonight. I am so excited to start the evening with the incomparable Donald Byrd. Thank you so much for being here, Donald.
It's my pleasure to be here. I'm really excited about this.
This is going to be a wonderful night. First, I want to check in with you and see how you're doing. Tell us where you're joining us from and how you are.
Okay, I'm joining you from Seattle, which is my home. And how am I doing? I'm doing well. I think I've had a really busy week, and I had a I'm making a piece on Pacific Northwest Ballet, and so I had a run through of the piece today uh, with dancers in various studios and via Zoom, and we'd go from one studio to the next to look at what they were doing. So yeah, so I'm good.
Good, good. And I'm happy to hear that you are still in the creative process and setting work on different companies, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, to get things started, let's dive into some of your background, Donald. Can you tell us about your individual dance journey from being a performer to a choreographer? And also, could you clue us into some of your Southern California connections?
Okay. Wow, that's a lot to my. Sometimes I forget. In some ways, I forget that I was a dancer. I started out as a dancer because my identity has been so tied into being a choreographer that sometimes I forget that part of my life and what that was. And I started. Uh, I won't go as far back as a child and watching Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies and trying to dance like that. But that's where it really started, and I always had so I was always interested in dancing, even though I didn't know that you could have a career as a dancer, and I didn't even know that was something that I would want to do anyway. But anyway, I think this journey that I've been on actually began while I was at Tufts University, and I there was a young woman that I saw, and walking across campus, and I mean she was so like magnificent looking, and so being a young crazy person, I went running towards her, and I asked her, why do you look the way you look? Why do you move like that? And she looked at me and smiled and said, because I am a ballet dancer. And so that was kind of the beginning of the journey, like being, and wanting to have more conversations with her. And so I would see her at dinner, and I would always sit with her and get her to talk about dance. We became very good friends. And then when she transferred to Barnard, and so later I went. So to make a long story short, I ended up in New York after uh, I finally decided to go to New York, even though I had studied there once before. I had studied at the London School of Contemporary Dance, but after this one summer at the Harvard Summer Dance Program, uh, I met some really interesting. Uh, some of the teachers were really interesting choreographers. Mel Wong, who had been a dancer in the Cunningham Company, and Catherine Posen, and so they were really interesting to me. And so I went to New York hoping to kind of do some work with them, and they were very encouraging. And so I did But what I ended up doing was I had a scholarship at the Ailey School, so I was ended up being at the Ailey School for 2 years, and then from there I started to do freelance work around. Uh, I I danced with. There were these two sisters that uh, what was their names? I just lost the name. Uh, they later ran the program at at Boston Conservatory. Emiko and Yasuko, last name. Uh, anyway, I danced with them. I danced with Elizabeth Keene. I was an apprentice with Catherine Posen's company. Uh, I found myself, I, I danced with Twyla. I got fired. Maybe it's not fired, it's the word. I got let go. I got let go. I danced with Gus Solomons Jr. and uh, and I ended up in California because Gus was made the dean of the dance school at Cal Arts, and the company was in residence part of the year there. So that's how I ended up in California, and then I ended up being a regular faculty member at Cal Arts in the dance school. During that time, I started to choreograph. I was bitten by the bug, and uh, and that's all I ever wanted to do. And I started my company in in Los Angeles in 1978, and that was the beginning of the, I think, in the journey that I am now with dance companies, even though it's a different dance company. But I think sometimes I say to people about my experience in California is that was the happiest time in my life. It maybe didn't always feel like that at the time, but I was really extremely happy because I was living in a place of possibility, what might be. I didn't really have a career or anything yet. I had a sort of had a dance company, but it was mostly an idea more than it was anything else. And so everything seemed possible to me. And I was living on the beach. And so it was a perfect world.
Fantastic. So you formed the company and it will evolved into a company and then you moved to New York City, right?
Right. That's correct.
What was it like transitioning from Los Angeles to New York with your company now as a choreographer?
Well, as I said earlier, I had lived in New York before, so in some ways it was not like, I mean, going back, uh, moving back to New York from Southern California, where I lived for 6 or 3 years. Uh, what was different was the dance culture of New York was really different when I returned. And I mean, even though my company had been invited a couple of times to perform at Dance Theater Workshop in New York while we were still based in Los Angeles, but coming back, and there was something that had happened that I did not remember being there when I studied there. And that was there was a level of professionalism that had occurred in the dance world, especially uh, the modern dance world. I mean, ballet had always had a kind of level of professionalism, I think. And when I say professionalism, I mean that people were, not only did people get paid regularly, they had contracts. And I think this was also around the time of the NEA with the dance touring program that they had. And so that kind of encouraged that. And also, I think this idea of dance as a career had emerged with, I didn't remember that being true before. I think when I was studying in New York and when I left to go to LA, the idea was that dance was an art, and you did whatever you needed to do to support your being an artist. And so you didn't think of it, you didn't make decisions based on career. Is this going to move me forward? And I returned, and that was completely different. That's exactly what had happened. People thought of dance as a career, and and I felt like I was behind. I needed to catch up. And so and also that division between the uptown and the downtown, and the postmodernists were on the ascension. And uh, and so it was a very different experience returning. And I felt, as I said before, I felt like I was behind. And so I felt like I was catching up. I had to catch up.
How many years were you in New York before you decided to leave and go to Seattle and lead Spectrum?
Uh, I think I was in New York for maybe, I say 24 years, but I think it's probably a little bit less than that because I conflate the time, uh, the time that I had a company with the time that I was in New York. So I think if you take 6 years off of that, that's probably how much time it was. And what would that be? 24 minus 6 is
18.
18,
18.
which is interesting because I've been now at Spectrum for 18 years.
Now, what was the transition like going to Seattle, and what was the dance scene like there when you went to Spectrum at the time?
Okay. That's a complicated question for me. Uh, I came to Seattle after I closed my company in New York. I have to tell this story because it's an important part of it. I closed my company for a lot of reasons. There are reasons that kind of circulated around and in the press, and those reasons mostly that had to do with that the company had been bankrupt by the Harlem Nutcracker. That's only partially true. And so the real reason for me was that the what I was doing in New York, the kind of work that I was producing the last couple of years there, was not why I had started the company. I started doing something that it seemed outside of my integrity to be doing what I was doing. And so I was really unhappy because I felt like there's a level of dishonesty in terms of what I was doing. And so, I mean, and you hear people talk about this all the time, and perhaps it's a phase that one goes through with an organization, is that at first, the work that I did was about feeding who I was as an artist or wanted to be as an artist. And then it became about the machine of the dance company. So everything was and so sometimes I would do things that, well, okay, that's a really good, I had a really great agent, David Lieberman. And so he was very good at coming up with ideas like maybe you should do this. Like he said, tell me some stuff. And he was selling it. People would get excited about it. And and on a technical level, I was excited about it too, but I was not necessarily artistically enthused, even though I would say a project like the Harlem Nutcracker, I was in fact enthusiastic about that. But there were some other things that I did that were uh, I was not so excited about. So I closed my company because uh, it was one of the reasons was because it was not doing what it had been designed to do. What I had founded it to do was I said that it was a laboratory to explore dance and movement ideas. That's how I saw it. And so it stopped being about that. In some ways, it started being about producing, about product. And so when I decided to close my company, I was talking to David Parsons, and he said to me, "I'll get to Seattle," and he said, "You should have a press conference." And I said, "A press conference? Why would I have a press conference?" He says, "Well, you need to have a press conference because people will know that you are available." And I went, "Oh, okay." And so, the thing is that I had the press conference and people knew that I was available, and I started being approached for jobs. And the one at Spectrum was one of the ones I was approached for. I did not necessarily want to come to Spectrum. Spectrum didn't was small, and its focus was primarily around jazz dance at the time. Dale Merrill ran it, and also it felt Dale is a very different person than I am, and I would say to the board there, like Dale is really sweet. I'm not, you know. Are you sure I'm the person that you want to come there? Excuse me. And so I came, and so I was confronted with the smallness. I was confronted with the board of directors who, even though they had hired me, they were not really thrilled about my being there. And mostly because I was just not Dale. It didn't have anything really to do with me, but it was just, I was like him. And so then I was not, so I think within the first month that I was there, half the board resigned, something like that. And so and I found that the dance scene here was seemed what's the word? I don't want to. It didn't seem backwards. What it seemed was that it had a very particular way that it saw things. And so actually what was here was there was a ballet world because Pacific North Ballet was here and they had a huge audience, huge following. Everybody knew everything that they did. And then there was everything else that was dance and movement related. And also when I arrived here, it was very, very white. And so sometimes I felt like sometimes people would interact with me in a way that I would say were microaggressions. And, uh, and so I resented being here in Seattle at the beginning very much. I disliked the culture of Seattle. What it seemed very passive aggressive to me, and you know the people didn't understand what I was doing, what I was trying to do, and so I felt like I was always fighting uh, a lot of things, and so over and the company was not particularly diverse. It was, but it wasn't. It didn't feel like the diversity or the desire to be diverse was an integral part of the identity of the company. And so I started working trying to do that. And so what happened was as I brought in, as more dancers moved to Seattle to work at Spectrum, dancers of color, Black dancers, that when they would leave the company, they would stay in Seattle. Many of them did. And so they started to make work here. And so the dance community as a whole became more diverse. It became, so now, for example, there is and I'm going to give myself credit for that because I did bring those people here. I give them credit for deciding to stay, but that they came and they made work. And the dancers at Spectrum started to integrate themselves into the rest of the dance community, as opposed to, I think before it was a little bit on the outside. And there were kind of like camps in Seattle, I think, in the dance world. And it became much the Spectrum community, the dancers of the of Spectrum started to integrate themselves into the dance community at large in in Seattle. And so for me, that was a kind of an important uh, happening thing that happened. Uh, and now I would say that I actually love being in Seattle. I mean, I love a lot of things about it. I mean, it's changed around me, you know, like out it's all changing out there. And so I one day I woke up and I didn't recognize it. It wasn't what it had been before. And so it was kind of like waking up from a dream and and I love being here. I love what's going on here. I love what the dance artists do here. I feel a real connection to them. I feel a desire to support them in any way that I can, and regardless of their race or ethnicity or the other things, the criteria that people use to define diversity. Uh, and So I love being here. That's the short answer. Don't expect short answers from me. No, I'm joking.
We don't want any short answer from you. We want all of that good stuff. Thank you for that. Um, Donald, can you speak to the activism that is so prevalent in your work? I would love to hear more about that generally, like what drives your activist spirit in the choreography you create.
Yeah, I think it's always been in my work. I don't think it was. I didn't lead with it as much as I do now. I think even when Liz was in the company, that there was the piece I did, enactments in time of plague, was really in some ways was a response to the AIDS epidemic at the time, and so in one of the, and I think also did the minstrel show, and so there were pieces that I did that were, you know, inclined, leaning towards social justice and what then they call issue-driven work, and so but I was also still wanting to hone my craft. And so, and abstract works are really good ways to do that, you know. And so, and also, I thought that in order to be better at making this issue work, then my craftsmanship needed to be better. Because one of the things that I noticed that people would dismiss you, they go, well, they couldn't dance really, you know, and blah. And so they use that as a way of not taking in what the questions that I wanted them to engage with. And so I said, well, I need to take care of all the craft stuff so that they can't use that as an excuse to disengage. And but I also think, I think being Black uh, and being very conscious of I grew up in the Jim Crow South, and being very conscious of the journey that Black people travel in this country uh, made, I, it seems inevitable that I would kind of start heading towards social justice because I felt compelled to. And I think also, I think being at the Ailey School, watching the kind of work Mr. Ailey was making at that time, being around that and seeing that uh, was, I mean, because that work, his work at the time was very much about the Black experience. And so I think that's part of that, those elements were factors in my doing the kind of work that I do today.
Fantastic. You are able to include so much of what viewers like myself feel and think when I see your work on stage, especially when it comes to these social issues. Um, we actually have an excerpt of the visceral work Shot, which premiered in 2017. And after we take a look at that clip, we will dive into the background and creation of that work. Let's take a look.
August 11th, 2014, Ezell Ford, 25, Los Angeles, California. November 20th, Akai Gurley, 28, Brooklyn, New York. November 22nd, Tamir Rice, 12, Cleveland, Ohio. December 2nd, Rumain Brisbane, 34, Phoenix, Arizona. December 30th, Jeremy Reed, 36, Bridgeton, New Jersey. January 8th, 2015, Artego Damon Howard, 36, Union County, Arkansas. February 4th, Jeremy Lett, 28, Tallahassee, Florida. February 15th, Laval Hall, 25, Miami Gardens, Florida. February 28th, Thomas Allen, 34, Wellston, Missouri. March 1st, Charlie Ledoux Canong, 43, Los Angeles, California. March 6th, Nescalis Vicente, 37, Aurora, Colorado. March 6th, Tony Robinson, 19, Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a deaf
This world is a mean world to live in, to stay in. This world is a mean world No mother, no father, no sister, love, no brother. This world is a mean world to
Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He has no weapon. He has no weapon. Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything. He doesn't have a gun. He has a TBI. He's not going to do anything to you guys. He just took his medicine. Keith, don't let them break the windows. Come on out the car. Keith, don't do it. Keith, get out the car. Keith, Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, 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 don't. Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? He better not be fucking dead. He better not be fucking dead. I know that fucking much. I know that much. He better not be dead. I'm not coming near you. I'm gonna record though. I'm not coming near you. I'm gonna record though. He better be alive because he better be alive. How about that? Yes, we're here over here at 9453 Lexington Court. These are the police officers that shot my husband, and he better live. He better live. Because he didn't do nothing to them. He good. Ain't nobody touched nobody, so they all good. I know he better live. I know he better live. How about that? I'm not coming to you guys, but he better live. He better live. Y'all hear this and you see this, right? He better live. I swear he better live. Yup. He better live. He better fucking live. He better live. He better live. And I ain't going nowhere. I'm in the same damn spot. The fuck? That's okay. Did y'all call the police? Did y'all call an ambulance?
I'll be so glad when the sun goes down. When the sun goes down. I'll be so glad when the sun goes down. When the sun goes down. I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down. I wanna lie down. I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down. I wanna lie down. I wanna lie down, baby. I wanna lie down. I ain't all that
Stop, please! Stop! Please! Stop! Stop! Okay, okay, okay! Please! Don't shoot! Stop! 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 Please! Don't shoot! Stop! Don't shoot! Okay, okay, okay! Stop! Don't shoot! Please stop! Don't shoot! Stop!
That was an excerpt of Shot, choreographed by Donald Byrd and performed by Spectrum Dance Theater. As always, Donald, your work is so impactful. I have goosebumps and chills. I'm always in work of your work. It's so honest. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Donald, there's so much tragedy and so much pain to process. How do you decide what monster to stare down and face with your work?
Wow, that's a what monster to stare down. Maybe, and I don't mean this to sound glib, but maybe what the monster to stare down is which one is in front of me at the moment, or which monster needs to be confronted. And so sometimes it's not so obvious. I think with Shot, for example, with the police shootings of unarmed Black people, that's kind of, that was there was a kind of obviousness about that needing to be addressed. Whether people
Right.
were addressing it or not at the time, it needed to be. But then there are other pieces where it's not so obvious to, I mean, to almost anybody, everybody, including myself. But then when giving it some thought, I think, well, maybe that's what I should focus on. So a piece like Strange Fruit, which looked at lynching. Lynching is not, you know, and thinking about lynching as being, and I think, let me back up. I think lynching for me, because of growing up in the Jim Crow South, it was always in the background. And so also understanding that in some ways one could look at these police shootings as being another manifestation of Jim Crow lynching.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of how I, you might say, negotiate which monster I'm going to stare down.
Mm. So the dancers that we see, and dancers in general, I mean, the stereotype is that they are usually in the earlier parts of their development and their lives. And you have them facing these really huge topics. How do you create an environment where the dancers can bravely go on this creative journey with you, you know, as they are themselves gaining life experience?
Yeah. I think because I've been doing it long enough, I've kind of developed and learned some strategies about how to do it. I think I have to kind of have to have a relationship with them that's based on trust. They have to trust me, otherwise they won't do it.
Makes
They
sense.
don't want to do it. And I think in the past, in my career, that my relationship with the dancers was not based on trust. It was kind of, a lot of it was based on fear and intimidation and bullying and badgering and pushing. And, you know, that produces results of a sort, but it also does a lot of damage. And what I've realized over the years is that I love dancers, and I really don't have, I don't have a desire to harm. But then I also learned some things, like from this particular group of dancers that was dancing. It's one of the dancers in this group, Madison Oliver, once said to me, I was in a really bad mood one day. I don't know why, you know, like who knows why you're in a bad mood. And she couldn't do anything right as far as I was concerned. I'm kind of giving her a hard time, and I can see her being frustrated. She's a very level-headed person. And she said to me, she came over and she said to me, Donald, you do know that we're trying to give you what you want, right?
Mm.
And that landed for me, you know. You know, it made sense. And so I think because of that, I think one of the things I try to do is I try to have a relationship with the dancers that's based on trust. And also I engage them in the process rather than my coming in and say, you do this, you do this, you do this, blah, 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 that they are engaged in the process of the making and the creation of the, not only the piece, but the movement. And so that they are invested in it. And a central part of that process is research. I ask them to do research. So I'm doing research, they're doing research, they have research assignments. We talk about what they discovered during their research. And so the atmosphere in the theater is one about around investigation and about learning, and I feel like one of my that my job is on some level is to that the dancers are the primary beneficiaries of the work that I do in terms of what they gain from it. I mean, yes, there's the audience and we want them to get that, but because the dancers are engaged in these processes, that they are actually getting a lot more. And so what I have to do is to enrich that experience for them.
This is actually the perfect time to bring in Liz Maxwell, a former Donald Byrd the Group company member and current faculty member of the Department of Dance at Chapman University. Welcome to the conversation, Liz.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you back. Liz actually did our first ever A Dancer event back in the summer with Sean Green, so I'm happy to have you back. So Liz, I would love to hear your perspective about being the part of the creation of one of Donald's works. It's technical and it pushes you with your performance presence. What is that like?
Well, I'll go back just a tiny bit. The climate in New York at the time was very much about analytic postmodernism, and everybody was, doing incredibly rich abstract patterns. Donald mentioned that. And Donald and I were both studying at the Cunningham School at the time, and we were reacquainted by doing that and dancing with Bill Young. And then Donald was creating a new company and invited me to audition. So I was kind of like, the analytic postmodern people were pushing the envelope in one direction, and I was all on board with that. But I thought Donald's direction was pushing in a different direction. But I was very interested. So I found his work to be incredibly challenging. I feel like as a dancer, the dancers had to unite together and create the message. And I think we were all really trying to do that. And what Donald said about being invited to research, I found that to be really exciting, to have input into what we were doing, to kind of go out in the world and research how this bigger message was affecting us, and talking to people and bringing that back into the studio. That was really rich. So everything was very dramatic in a way that analytic postmodernism wasn't. And it was also very, very challenging dancing, Yes, there was never any resting. And I first met Donald, when I was 15. He was crossing the country, I think, going from New York to back to Cal Arts to do work, and he ran into our little company of high school dancers, and he set a piece on us. And I believe that was the first time I learned how fast to dance. And I wasn't a fast dancer, and he taught me how to dance quickly. And now I enjoy it. At the time, I had to really learn. But yeah, he's fast. Everything's fast. And now looking at that piece again, I appreciate how fast it really is.
Wow. What was your favorite piece that you performed?
Um, ooh, goodness gracious. I love all his names. I love enactments in Time of the Plague. A piece called Speakeasy was fun. Surveillance. All these Rend. All these titles are really cool even now to think about. Cruelty and Reconciliation was a really cool piece. I had a huge solo, so I like that too. And Drastic Cuts was the last piece I did with him, and I enjoyed that a lot because we were given a lot of choreographic problems to solve, and that was really exciting for me. But I think the biggest impact probably was the minstrel show. It was a long process. It was multi-layered, and it was quite eye-opening.
That piece is iconic, to say the least. Absolutely. You mentioned the honor of performing a solo. We actually have a very special treat tonight. Donald has been so generous as to share an excerpt of the first three sections of the film Lyric Suite, which are all solos. Let's take a look right now.
Fuckers don't love me no more. 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 Motherfuckers don't love me no more. Motherfuckers don't love me no more.
nation's top infectious disease doctor that millions could be infected by coronavirus and just how many Americans could die.
As the coronavirus continues its deadly march across the country, this warning for Americans.
Picking up what we're seeing now, you know, I would say between 100 and 200
if we don't take these things relatively seriously from this point in. We're going to have a bumpy ride over the next few months.
Coronavirus has turned lives upside down, and there's a stark warning the threat remains a serious one.
This hasn't been stopped. This is a virus we're going to have to live with, and if we're not careful, if we don't take these things relatively seriously from this point in, we're going to have a bumpy ride over the next few months.
I'd like to have him go back and do his job. So does anybody have any question? Please. One thing, Secretary of State Pompeo is extremely busy, so if you have any question for him, yeah, what would John do that? If it was back to, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to never was state coronavirus, they call it. I don't think that's going to happen until we have a situation where you can control the population. But at least they're getting back to that. This is a very different. I did know. All I have to do is let anybody know. Are you ready? How many cases were in the United States? How many people died in the United States? The worst outbreaks. How many cases? How many people died in the United States? And yet I closed up the country. And I believe there were no deaths. Does anybody have any question? Please. One thing, the Secretary of State is extremely busy, so if you have any questions, what would John do that? Because that's what I'd like to do tonight here. Never was state coronavirus. I don't think that's going to happen. But at least they're getting back to
Wow, I can so easily understand or even relate to each of the sections of Lyric Suite we just experienced. Donald, can you share what it was like taking on such an immense project about coronavirus in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic?
Yes. It actually wasn't difficult because I was in the middle of it and I was kind of living it. And so, in some ways, each one of those people, there are 11 solos total. So I felt like each one of them, and the like the I really have a really different relationship with my couch as a result of the coronavirus. And
Same.
uh, so yes, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted here because I got a message that I need to respond to really quickly.
Well, no problem, Donald. Actually, we will go to Liz. Liz, you and I both were so inspired by the film when we talked about it a little bit. What were some of the things that resonated with you?
Well, I just feel that there's so many different representations of our experience in quarantine, done so differently with film, and also the dancing. All of it was so different and handled so differently. I also really enjoyed the symbolism of many of the sections, and also I really liked his choice of music. You know, Berg is perfect for this time.
Yeah.
It's very dramatic and angst ridden. But I like how it also blended with all of the spoken word, and yeah, I was very moved by this, and to see so much work, film work with dance right now, I just felt like this was a perfect iteration of where we're at.
I think that about the music, I went, there's a very famous piece by Anna Sokolow,
Rooms.
Rooms, right? That's
Yeah.
but she also did a piece called Lyric Suite, which is how I first heard the music, and I heard it. It was Repertory Dance Theater of Utah was performing it. Can you excuse me for a minute? I really need.
Absolutely, no problem, Donald.
I was also
Liz,
going to say that it reminds me a lot of Rooms, which was from 1955. Anna Sokolow set was her experience of New York, where everybody is isolated and away from each other, and so she kind of depicts different rooms and imagines what their life would be like behind their windows. And I worked with on Rooms and performed that for a number of years.
Yeah, we had the honor to see a little excerpt of that actually when you did your talk, which our viewers can find at musicocenter.org, the Ever a Dancer Conversation with Liz Maxwell and Sean Green. And you can see Liz perform a solo from Anna Sokolow's Rooms, which is really exciting.
So it was also when I saw Lyric Suite, Liz knows Bill Evans was one of the dancers in it, Bill Evans and Greg Lisenberry. And so when I was
teachers.
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this piece, I thought about doing this piece, I thought of Berg and I thought of Anna's Lyric Suite. But so what happened with the music is Berg, but it's also, there are two composers that I asked to respond to the Berg music. And so it's Berg plus Emmanuel Witztum and Rob Whitmer. And so they created responses to the Berg. And so the combination of the Berg and their responses is what makes the score for the piece.
Actually, I think that's a great segue into our question and answer portion of the evening, because our first question is about your use of music, your use of spoken word, and some viewers noticed your use of Black spirituals in your work. Can you talk about the auditory experience that goes with the creation of your work?
Yeah. Well, so in terms of the music from Shot, for example, mostly it was all done by Jamie O'Brown, and it was part of an exploration that he was doing of taking field recordings and then composing around the field recordings. And so most of the field recordings were, some were spirituals and some were work songs. And so, because I thought that the work songs express the kind of exhaustion that people talked a lot about during the summer, during the demonstrations,
yes,
about just being tired. And and so I think for me, like finding things that actually, that that the sound becomes an important part of what I do because it adds to the experience of, so it becomes I'm hoping for a complete experience, not just what the dancers are doing, even though I think that the body and the dancer is centered, but that these other experiences in these other elements enrich the experience that the audience, the viewer has. So that's really important to me. And also, I think I just grew up. I mean, I studied music as a kid, and I mean, up until I was around 21 or 22, I studied pretty seriously. So music and sound is a really important part of how I think about things. And it's interesting that now I can't listen to music for enjoyment or pleasure because I listen to music all the time that's work related.
Right.
So silence is a kind of John Cage moment, you know. I need some silence here for a bit.
Our next question is actually about you both talking about New York. And we had some questions, folks that aren't familiar. What is this uptown downtown divide you spoke of? Can you speak about that more?
Yes, I mean, Liz and I both can speak to that. You know, the downtown movement in some ways, and Liz talked about the postmodernists and stuff, that they were centered downtown. And so now some of the things that we think of as kind of normal in the like dance exploration research and all of that stuff was centered in the downtown. So we generally think of below 14th Street. And so what happened was that there were almost no theaters down there, and so most of the performances happened in lofts or other kinds of alternative spaces. And so there was a general kind of aesthetic that started to emerge and develop as a result of where people were physically located. And so then also you had some of the great icons of dance in America. The Cunningham Studio was located downtown. And then the uptown were like the ballet companies, Alvin Ailey, the Graham Company, they were all uptown, and that they were less experimental. They were investigative around the things that they were interested in, but there was a lot of, downtown, the dance converged with and bumped into theater, into alternative theater, into people experimenting with, with identity and lifestyles, and just kind of, it was kind of wild and wacky and fun and very invigorating. And like, it was full of characters that downtown, the dance downtown and the people downtown were, in some ways, you could say, nonconformist.
Mm-hmm. Liz, any other things to add about downtown and uptown dance?
Donald did a very good job of that. And yeah, the institutions were more the uptown, the commercial kind of dance on Broadway, although Donald has done Broadway work. But there was kind of a divide. There was the experimental work that the downtown artists were invested in. And I think things have shifted, and it's not really uptown, downtown anymore. I think it was more or less where people were located,
yeah.
What they could afford as well. The downtown at once upon a time was where all the artists were, because it was a little cheaper. So
that makes sense. Final question of the evening. Donald, what do you look for in dancers that you're going to bring into your company, or what do you look for in artists that you're seeking to set work on?
Well, what do I look for? That's changed over time. I think what I look for, I think one of the things I look for that I think has been pretty consistent is I read an interesting, it was an article, Time Daily, the actor, and she said she was being interviewed she was doing a master class on Broadway, and she just thought that was not a good part for her, that no one would have thought that's what she would do, but she did it. And she said something in that interview. She says, the primary thing it takes to be an artist is courage. You know, like, yes, you want to have talent and all of that stuff, that helps, but it really is about courage. And so I think I look for dancers that are courageous. They may not know that they're courageous, but I'm like looking for that courageousness and a willingness to take risks. And people used to say, oh, they're so fearless, or you're so fearless. I don't think it's fearless. I think it's the ability to act in spite of your fear. And I look for dancers that are willing to take those kinds of risks and chances, and allow themselves to be, in some ways, sometimes put through the ringer, you know. And so I kind of, and also because of that courage that they have, I have great admiration for dancers. I think my history sometimes would say that I do not, or I did not. But one of the interesting things about staying alive long enough is that you discover certain truths, and the truth is that I have a lot of respect and admiration for dancers and what they allow themselves, that they willingly engage in to move this art form forward.
I think that is the perfect way for us to end our time today. Just a nice word about dancers. I love that so much. Donald, can you tell us how we can engage with you in Spectrum Dance Theater at this time?
Yes, well, you know, we're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram like everybody else. And it's on those accounts, it is Spectrum Dance, SDT Seattle. That's
perfect.
And then, but our website is www.spectrumdance.org.
Perfect. And Liz, is there anything on deck for you right now, or anything happening in the Department of Dance at Chapman?
Oh gosh, just finished the semester, and I'm going to be looking.
Congrats.
37 solos next week.
Wow.
So, we also did our first virtual concert, or not concert. We did our first virtual offering that will be in a virtual concert. And so I had the first time I ever really did something like that with film. And it was really fun. I had
Great.
drones and everything. So I'm looking forward to some of these cool things that we're doing and learning. But yeah, just teaching another semester in January. So
Back at it. Wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you both again so much for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Great to have you, Donald.
It's great to be here.
The Musco Center Creative Fund makes At the Musco Online programs like this possible, while also helping to fund the presentation of world-class artists, ensembles, and speakers on our stage in the hopeful near future. Please consider donating at muscocenter.org. Please take a moment to tell us how your experience was in the chat. We love your feedback. On behalf of Musco Center for the Arts, the Department of Dance at the College of Performing Arts, and Chapman University, thank you for joining us at the Musco. We hope to see you soon. Have a great night, and remember, you are ever a dancer. Have a great night.